Hello and welcome to Tea Time with Joe. My guest today is Ian Montgomery. Ian is an Emeritus Associate Professor within the Department of Health Management and Policy at the University of Iowa. Ian was raised in Iowa City and has a diverse resume of jobs and careers which include gym manager, correctional officer, deputy sheriff, assistant administrator, executive director, consultant, chief operating officer, chief executive officer, director of the Center for Healthcare Executive Studies and Services, clinical associate professor, executive in residence, executive MHA Career Coach, hospital chaplain, and hospice companion. Oh, and by the way, he's also a state level powerlifting winner. I met Ian when I pursued my Master's of Health Administration, or MHA, program, and he's been a mentor to me ever since. Ian is now retired and enjoys spending time with his wife, Lori, and dog, Cole. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And let me just say I'm exhausted after you reading that. I didn't know I'd done so much. I need to lie down.
It's time. Yeah. Ian, I want to begin with how I first heard about the legendary Ian Montgomery. I had a non-traditional path to the MHA program. I applied late, and therefore I missed the formal on-site interview days. So I didn't get to know you before I entered the program. I didn't even know who you were until day one of the program. We were going through orientation that week. Everyone was nervous because we're all meeting each other, and here's the cohort that we're gonna be together for the next 2 years. People were making small talk, and a common thing to do was compare notes from the on-site interview days. But since I wasn't part of those on-site interview days, I didn't have anything to contribute, so I just, like a fly on the wall, overheard those conversations with my classmates talking to each other. Your name came up very quickly because students that interviewed with you all said it was the most unique experience interviewing with you. Each of them found it so memorable because of the way you started interviews. From what I understand, there was no small talk. You did not ask about their background. You just started the interviews with, what questions do you have for me?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, is that true?
Yes.
What's the thought process behind it?
Well, the thought process behind it is I already have the information I need on each student. So I don't need them to, I mean, it's not like a quiz. When did you graduate from high school? I have it right there in front of me. What brings you here? Well, you've already written a narrative on that topic, and I've read it. We had, I don't remember if it was, I think it was about 20 minutes to interview each student. So I wanted to use that time as carefully and respectfully as possible. And I just thought it was important to just get to the meat of the matter, starting actually with a foundational belief that you deserve to be here. You've already done what you have done with your life and with your application process to be sitting here in this department right now. What I want to do is make sure this is the right fit for you. And sometimes in the interview process, I learned that it was not. And I also wanted to see, by turning things around unexpectedly like that, how someone would react to that. Because I think that would give a better demonstration of what is really going on. I mean, we've all interviewed people that interview great, and then they get on the job and it's just not the right thing for them to be doing and not the right thing for the organization. So I'm trying to cut through that. You know, some of the other questions I would ask is, what do you bring to the cohort? What do you want the cohort of students to bring for you? How is this going to work in your mind? So let me give an example of, and this did happen a few times, of someone who would not work out. Someone who says, look, what I need is a piece of paper that says that I've graduated from this great program. And I will do what it takes to be the first in my class, every single class, because I need the credentials in order to be the CEO of a large urban hospital within the next 5 years. That's what I need.
They would transparently say that.
More or less. I mean, that was kind of the theme probably about every other cohort, we would have someone who would say that. And I would say, you know what? I respect that. I understand what you're saying. You need to apply at Minnesota. Or you need to apply at Michigan. That's where they go. Mm-hmm. Here, what we have, it's all about the cohort, because it's all, the strength of our program is the network of alumni after you graduate. So if you want to be a cowboy, you know, that's fine. And there's plenty of CEO cowboys out there. But that's not what we teach, and you would not be comfortable in this environment. So, you know, tell me where else you're interviewing, and I'll tell you what I know about that program. And the most competitive thing you will do in this program is get into the program. After that, it's all about helping each other. Wow. That's the team, because what we teach fundamentally in the program, in both the executive version and the traditional version, is leadership. And the type of leadership we teach is team-based. So if you're going to tell me that you're not interested in being part of a team and helping each other and bringing people into the team that have diverse backgrounds so that they can test the sorts of things that you as a leader are angling towards, I think that's fine, but you're not going to be happy here.
Yeah.
So that's why that sort of revelation is not going to come out in the traditional, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be, and what's your GPA average, and what do you think about Iowa City? I mean, no, that's not helpful. So that's why I took that approach.
That makes so much sense. Is that characteristic of you just trying to get to cut through the niceties and the small talk, and let's just get to the crux of the conversation? Is that style of yours something that you learned throughout your career, or was that inherent from you? Hey, I don't really mess with the fluff. Just give me the real stuff.
It is something I learned through the boiler room of working for physician-owned organizations. So I can go into that a little bit, but I should also tell you that that is absolutely not the way I am now. In the work that I do now, I've had to unlearn all of that and transition to almost something diametrically opposite.
Tell me more.
Of that part?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I can kind of bring those two concepts together. So working for a physician-owned enterprise, let's just pick a number, 20 physicians are equal owners of this enterprise, was, and still is, to the extent that those type of organizations still exist, extremely challenging, because every dime that is spent is a dime out of their pocket. Mm-hmm. Plus, you don't have one boss, you have 20. So you've got these very high ego, high intelligence people, each of who thinks they're the boss, challenging you to produce a return on investment for every single decision that you make. So it's really, like I said, a boiler room situation. And what that taught me over the 35 years that I did it was, you better be right. Physicians uniformly do not like meetings. So the concept of, well, let's all get together and talk about this. Well, let's not. That would be the usual response. Tell me what I need to know, the physicians would say, and it varies by specialty, but the common denominator is some level of, tell me what I need to know, I will tell you what I think, you will make a decision, I will test you on that decision, and God help you if you're wrong, and then we'll go on to the next decision. Well, that engendered in me over the years this approach of being highly effective, highly efficient, and let's just cut the BS and get to what we need to know.
Yeah.
there was always a suspicion on my part, even though I was very successful doing that within the parameters that I chose, that that was not really me. So when I was an undergraduate at Iowa, I started off as a religion major, then became a social work major. That lasted about a semester, and then ended up with a dual degree in psych and soc. So I always had a very one-on-one, person-oriented, let's explore what's going on here, therapist, pastor kind of approach. And then I took a job that started me on the path of running physician organizations for physicians. So I had to take those tendencies and interests that I had and put them aside and then do this. And to a certain extent, being an administrator within the university educational system has some of those same characteristics, except that in a university educational system, you can never make a decision because that's kind of part of the deal. You just flop around and, but that's another story. So when I retired, I thought, okay, well, now's the chance to do what everyone says is impossible, and that's do a personality change, which became more reasonable in my case because it meant going back to who I was 40 years ago, or actually by that time almost 45 years ago. And it was hard. It was very hard. I went to seminary for a year. I found out that didn't work because it wasn't really giving me what I needed for a variety of reasons. Then the pandemic came, then the derecho came, then my favorite dog died, and it was kind of a mess. But out of that, I've been able to now, through a fair amount of hard work and some assistance from others, especially my wife, come full circle back to where I was as a long-haired hippie on the University of Iowa campus in the late 60s. So it's been quite a journey.
That actually surprised me as you're going through that it was really hard, because in my mind, I thought you were going to say the opposite. I thought you were going to say, it was me getting back to what I most naturally tend towards.
You would think that, and I thought that. I thought, okay, I'll just flip this switch, and I'll stop being this, this has got to stop now. That was the phrase I used the most as an administrator. I had another word in there that I won't say on the podcast, but this has got to stop. Right now, let's get onto it, plan backwards, line it up, make it happen. No. I thought I could just turn that off and go back to this more companioning way of relating to other people. But it was so difficult to become and remain successful in that mode that it was hard to turn it off, wash it out, relax. And there are a number of things that have really helped me with that transition. And it's an ongoing transition.
For sure.
But no, it was not easy. It was very difficult.
If I may ask, things that helped in your transition, you mentioned Lori, and I'm sure having your spouse is very helpful because they many times can know you better than you know yourself and help you guide that path. Maybe what other things that you would share that has helped you take that hard shell of now it makes more sense to me because you having that figure or personality led to success.
Yeah.
So that's what you do over 45
I was rewarded
years.
for it on a daily basis.
Exactly.
An hourly basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other things have helped in your unlearning of that?
I think time has helped a lot. And some of this unwinding of being more of a efficiency machine has just taken time and patience. I do, this won't surprise you, I do a lot of reading. And, my faith, although fairly non-traditional, has helped. So I've been able to put pieces of this together and come up with a faith structure that makes sense for me. I've found just very recently several little pockets of communities that feel the same way I do, so that's helpful. You know, the Buddha says the second jewel is the Sangha, which is the community that is supportive of you, so it's been helpful to know that I'm not alone in some of these beliefs. I am now in the 3rd week of MBSR training. Have you heard about this?
I have not.
This is mindfulness-based stress reduction training. It's about 45 years old, and it's the practical application of meditation and mindfulness. So strip out the religious connotations with Buddhism, Taoism, Zen, that sort of thing. And what is practical in the learning and application of meditation and mindfulness, and then stress test that with scientific studies, and there have been hundreds of these that have proven to be very effective. So MBSR has also helped me, and as I said, I'm going through some fairly intensive training in that right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, bits and pieces. There hasn't been any blinding flash of light. I still can resort, although reluctantly, to, the former Ian. So Dr. Vaughn, who you know refers to me now as Ian 4.0. So Ian 1.0 was public safety, corrections, law enforcement. 2.0 was being a healthcare administrator. 3.0 was being a university professor and administrator, and 4.0 is this new hospice-oriented spiritual companion, chaplain type person.
Fascinating.
So Vaughn will contact me every now and then and say, are we on 5.0 yet? And I said, well, I'm still alive because I think 5.0 is probably like dead. I don't have the energy to go through another iteration here.
So Ian, you're in your 70s. Do you still ask yourself the question, who is Ian Montgomery?
Oh yes, every day. Every day. And I think it's an important question to ask, and for everybody to ask. This, whether it be a gentle type of question or a stress test, I mean, we're challenged every day, I think, to be our authentic self and not be the self that is necessarily rewarded from a career perspective or, friendships with other people or whatever. Who are you standing alone within a community of people? And are you comfortable with that? And are you going to do something to make that place that you inhabit physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, one that you can be proud of, so that when the time comes, you can say, well, let's go.
Wow.
Let's go. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that is an important point to ask yourself that quite frequently. And I bet you being an example, but personally for me, I feel like how I would answer that question just changes naturally with the seasons. Because when Emily and I became parents,
yes, oh yeah,
life looks different. I wonder if I would answer that, like, who is Joe Kim? What's my identity? The core stays the same. My belief in Christ and my faith and what I stand for with the core beliefs. But I think in seasons it looks different, and I could tell you, I'm now a parent. That wasn't an identity, before JJ was born, and how that looks in this season is totally different from grad school.
Yes.
Starting my career.
I think it's important to recognize that, and also to contemplate what's next, because you're not through. I mean, even using the parent example, one day you'll probably be a grandparent. What's that going to look like? And how do you position yourself within the world, both the spiritual world and the physical world, so that you have a comfort that your identity is authentic but yet still growing. So
yeah,
I think these are important topics to talk about and to think about. And I'm concerned that a lot of people, through no fault of their own, or they are actively choosing to not think of these things. then, and this is where being a chaplain comes in, they are faced with a moment of spiritual trauma. So we are told within the chaplain service at St. Luke's that our job is to help with trauma, spiritual trauma, not necessarily emotional or physical, certainly not physical because we're not qualified. But when parents or when family members or patients find themselves all of a sudden, without any preparation, wondering, what's going on here? How can I get through this? Where is God? What is God? Because over half the people that are admitted to St. Luke's do not check any kind of denomination or religious affiliation on their admission form. So they are, in their minds, they're mistaken, but in their minds, they are without faith. And then something happens, they have a terminal diagnosis, or they're in a lot of pain, or they're about to die. They ask, where am I in this? And left to their own devices, what they come up with is whatever they were last formally taught about religion.
And it could be when they were in Sunday school.
It is. So, the typical person says, well, pastor, and I said, I'm not a pastor, I'm not ordained, but let's have this conversation. Yeah. I haven't been to church in a long while. Okay? I don't really know what to think about my situation, and I'm sorry that I haven't been going to church. I said, there's no need to apologize. Let's talk this through. I'm not sure I believe in God. Tell me about this God you don't believe in, because I probably don't either. So let's have a conversation. Let's talk about this so that you can feel more centered in this place right now and better able to take what's here for you and what's coming.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Okay, I know I can keep going, but I do think it's important to set context. So you're at Ian 4.0. I want to go to Ian 0.0. So okay. Let's go back to the early years, okay? So can you describe for us what life was like growing up? Who's in the family? Where are you guys? Paint the picture for us.
I think there are three elements that were foundational for me. One is I'm the oldest of four, so there's certain things that typically happen when you're the oldest. Secondly, I grew up in Iowa City, the Athens of the Midwest, so it's not like the rest of Iowa. And thirdly, maybe four things. Thirdly, my father was a university professor, nationally known, or internationally known in his field. And fourth, my parents are both from England. So I had an unusual upbringing, even in Iowa City, because my father was a professor. He was not from this country. My mother was not from this country. They were both very English in their orientation to the world. So they were learning how to live in America. They were learning what this weird first kid was all about. And, all of that kind of came together for an unusual but very, in many ways, very powerful upbringing, foundational, I should say, upbringing.
Your dad, was it biochemistry?
Yes.
Okay. Internationally known.
And Associate Dean of the College of Medicine.
Wow. So is that how healthcare and medicine was imprinted on you at such an early age? Not
really, because as the firstborn, I did everything I could to not be my dad. Oh. So I took no science courses. I had nothing to do with healthcare. Whatever he was doing, that's fine. I enjoyed an undergraduate double degree in Soc and Psych because he knew nothing about it. What really started me down the healthcare road was working at the Oakdale Security Hospital, because my first attempt at getting a master's degree was in criminology. So at that time, my wife became pregnant, and I decided that I didn't really want to be in grad school. I wanted to work. And so I had some acquaintances that worked at the Oakdale Security Hospital, so I got hired on there as a security officer, as a correctional officer. And I began to develop a belief, I think accurate at the time, that there was a better way to run that facility. And so I would converse with my dad about this, this is happening, I don't think this is right, this would be better, this. And he said, well, you know what you need? You need to go back to graduate school and get a degree in healthcare administration. I said, what would that be like? And he says, well, I'm helping to restart a dormant MHA program at Iowa. So he and Sam Levy were the ones who restarted the MHA program after it went dormant when our program in phase 1.0 got into a little bit of trouble, lost its accreditation, went down to like 2 faculty members and 3 students, and then came back up again with a first class that I was in.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I got into healthcare. Yeah. It was, ironically, and my dad and I had many talks about this, it was because of him that I'm in healthcare when I had spent so much energy trying to be everything that he was not. Not a university professor, not in science, not in any of that. And then here I am at faculty meetings, university-wide faculty meetings, and there's my dad, and there's Ian, and it's like...
The thing that you tried to run away from.
Yeah, I was running in a circle. It just came right back.
Is that because over time you realized how much of the same tendencies, or even if it's like little tics that your dad had, where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm my dad?
Yeah, people say that all the time.
Really?
And if my son was in the room right now, you would say within 5 minutes, you're Ian's son, aren't you? Yeah, that's destiny. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was it like being the oldest of 4?
Well, I was the one they experimented on, and I was also the weird one. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I was the first. I was the only. There were only 2 Ians in Iowa City at the time. The other one had changed his name from John Smith to Ian Smith because Ian is Scottish for John.
Gotcha. I did not know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had this weird name. I had, shoulder-length hair, which is hard to believe now. I had little tiny John Lennon wire rim glasses. I was just a hippie. My parents from England were looking at me going, we don't even understand what this is. But they were not strict. They allowed me to be myself. My siblings did not follow in that pattern. So they're much more conventional in their approach to life.
Did you take their hands-off approach with you in how you parented your own kids?
Unfortunately, the answer to that is neither yes nor no, because I got divorced while they were very little.
Gotcha.
So I lost them. So I effectively have not been a parent. I mean, I have children, but I have not been a parent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have met my current wife if that hadn't happened. And I've been married to her for 37 years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Is that how you think through? Because, with those hardships, divorce, question in my mind is, do you regret it? But do you think about, well, that's led me on to the path to meet Lori, and is that how you reconcile?
Yes, for the most part, I do think that way. It's turned out fine. But, in Ian 4.0, I don't worry about stuff. It's just, it is what it is. I mean, what matters is the present moment. So rehashing the past, worrying about the future, those are things that I am learning and practicing and training to not be a part of my life, or at least certainly not be a large part of my life.
That's such a great piece of advice.
Yeah, be here now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't worry about, I bet you look back on your life and you probably tell younger Ian in that moment of the boiler room, don't worry.
Oftentimes someone will say, what is the one piece of advice you would give a younger version of yourself? And I'm smiling because my advice is always, don't worry. Don't worry. It'll be all right.
Wow.
I mean, maybe it won't be all right, but you know what? It probably will, and there's not a lot you can do about it. So, I mean, this is very different than EM 2.0 or 3.0 or even 1.0. How do we fix this? How do we plan backwards? How do we stop this from happening again? I mean, we've got to develop the right systems. Well, I'm sure there very much is a place for that, and I'm very grateful for people who take on that burden and have that engineering way of looking at things. I think it's very important, but it's not the only way to be, and it's not the way I am now. So,
well, we started with Ian 0.0, 1.0. We got a bit of you transitioned from sociology, psychology, worked with your dad on being the first cohort. So I understand now how you springboarded yourself into healthcare administration.
Yes.
So going from, actually, do you want to speak on the correctional officer, deputy sheriff seasons in your life?
Yeah, that was just a phase I was going through. I mean, I was very interested in that. My hearing loss began to worsen a little bit, so I couldn't safely be in those roles. I mean, you don't want someone hearing impaired with a gun on their hip. I mean, it's just not a good idea. And I began to think that, back then anyway, very much a my way or the highway, very, very militaristic, rules way of living your life was just not something that I wanted to continue. I wanted something more than that, but I had some skills that I had built up during that time, leadership skills and traditional leadership skills that I wanted to take with me, and that's where I began to question how the Iowa Security Medical Facility at Oakdale was run, and begin to see that there was a different way to approach this other than wearing a uniform. So.
Okay, so after that, you start the MHA program and you start to get in healthcare leadership positions. Yes. So, I've listed assistant administrator all the way to chief executive officer. So when you look back on your career path and advancing through all those different levels, do you look at that whole career path and say, was it worth it? Was it not worth it? I would do it all over again. How do you reflect on all of that?
I think it's important for me to take a broad view. I mean, it was remunerative for me. I mean, I'm very comfortable now as a result largely of those positions that I had. It led me into 3.0, working in the university, which was very satisfying until it wasn't, and then I left. So yes, I would say broadly speaking, it was worth it. I learned something at every phase.
Yeah.
The challenge and the pain points are, I learned over those years and still believe that in any population of people, approximately 10% are crazy. So if you have 10 physicians, one is going to be a royal pain and a problem. And in situations where that person is influential, especially if they're in a leadership position, it is easy to lash out at the administrator and make life difficult. So the analogy I have of and others have agreed with this analogy, is that being an administrator, the CEO of a physician-owned medical group or enterprise, is very similar to being an NFL coach. You are only as good as your performance. There is almost no grace. These positions change over rapidly because of that. So transitioning in between jobs, going into consulting and coming out again and doing that sort of thing, I've had a lot of experiences, to the point that, when I first started teaching at the university, they would say, where are your academic credentials? Why are you here? What allows you to be in this position to teach? And my simple response is, I've got a lot of stories. Some of them are true. No, they were all true. But that's what I have to offer is, I never ran a huge organization, but I ran large enough organizations that I had to, in my position, I had to know a little bit about everything.
This point, Ian, I think is why you're consistently a favorite amongst MHA graduates, is because I feel like in the academic world, there's a bit of you're sheltered.
Yes.
It can work under a microscope, under controlled conditions, but you bringing stories, that's real life.
Yeah.
Especially your background in being physician-owned enterprises, which to me, I'm learning from you, is probably one of the most cutthroat environments.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're bringing that to the program. And as a student, when you're in an academic setting, when it's more a controlled environment, and we get your stories, I think that's why myself and classmates, I know for sure, were so drawn to your classes and hearing from you, because it's like, that's the real stuff.
Yeah.
Going back to why you ask, what questions do you have for me? Let's just get into the real stuff.
Yeah. Now, the one element of helping students is that I don't have any stories about working in a bureaucracy. So, students would come in from their work assignments or whatever and say, Ian, we know you've got a lot of stories, but how do you really work this large bureaucracy of Unity Point, Mercy One, UIHC? I said, I don't know. Because I learned very quickly that this is one mistake I didn't make, is trying to work in that environment. So when they started the Heart and Vascular Center at the university, and I was working at St. Luke's at the time, I was heavily recruited to be the first administrator of that enterprise. And these discussions, not really interviews, because they had no other candidates. I mean, the head of the Department of Cardiology, who's no longer there, he's at Johns Hopkins, wanted me to be his sidekick in this dyadic structure. And they set it up to create the position and to interview me and to make things happen. And 6 months went by. And, I was at the top levels of UIHC interviewing with my sponsor, kind of outside the door. I've got to make this happen. And I withdrew. And, they were just flabbergasted. And they said, well, why? We've invested all this time. I said, yeah, I mean, I don't have the job today. We haven't talked about pay or anything. I'd have to take a pay cut to take this job, but we haven't even talked about that. It would be nice to come full circle and be back at UIHC, although I've never been an employee there, but be back within the university system. But the fact that it is taking you this long tells me that if I accept this job, one of two things will happen within 3 months. Either I'll quit or you'll fire me. So that's the one element of student life that I think, unfortunately, is becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, you're the expert at this, not me, working within Unity Point. What is it like to work in a very multi-layered bureaucracy where the freedom to move, because I had total freedom. I mean, I was judged entirely by the results, as measured by, did my income go down this year or up? A physician speaking now. I'm paying you to have happy employees, expanded market share, and my income going up. Within the realms of ethics and legality and regulatory constraints, that's what I want you to do. Don't bother me with any of these details. Well, that's one way to be a healthcare administrator. Another is to know how to navigate a system, and I don't have that, and I never had that. And as that became increasingly important, because less than 50% of physicians now are in physician-owned organizations, my relevance and my stories I felt became less important
Yeah.
to students.
Yeah, and applicable.
And applicable. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So that led me to begin to contemplate the end of my career at the university.
And then how did you transition to hospital chaplain and companion? What was that about?
Well, I had thought that I might want to go into seminary, which I tried to do and was not successful for a variety of reasons. And I was looking for a different way to do that kind of work and be that sort of person. And so St. Luke's has a very interesting story where they have on-call chaplains that are not necessarily ordained. In fact, most of them are not ordained, so there is a place for me there if I could complete the training, which I did almost 3 years ago now. And that led to exploring hospice at Mercy, and that led to actually the area of hospice that I'm most focused on is bereavement. So most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time I'm working with family members post-death of a loved one. And that leads to these kinds of one-on-one conversations and group conversations about what's happened here and why, what's going on, and how do I deal with this pain that no surgical knife and no pill is going to help me with.
When you sit down and have those one-on-ones, what are you thinking through? What are you thinking about? How do you make those conversations?
Well, the first question I have is not going to surprise you. Tell me what's going on with you. Where are you in this? Tell me about where you are. And then people who are in grief, it's not as dependent as the normal literature would lead you believe, but there is a pain element of grief that is, it's just that. It's not grief, it's pain. It's intense pain. And that's obviously early on. So my first question is not asking them where are you on the pain, grief, tolerance, integration spectrum, but I need to know that. And the way to find that out, the shorthand way to find out is tell me about your loved one and your loss. And they will say, I lost my husband 5 weeks ago, 2 years ago, something like that. And that helps to determine where we go next in not my statements to you, because grief is not something that can be fixed. There is no fix of grief. There is integration of grief. You're learning to love someone in a different way. Mm. They're no longer physically here. So just like with interviewing prospective students, tell me where you are. What questions do you have? How can I help? Rather than, there are 4 stages of grief and you appear to be in 3 pain. No, everybody's different.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's not helpful.
It's not.
Are you drawn to this work because of grief and pain you've experienced yourself?
That's an excellent question. A little bit, yes, a little bit. But I just find it a good use of what I consider my strengths, and also the fact that it is the assistance in bereavement work is not, here's a pill, here's an exercise, here's this, here's that. It is working through it and learning how to, as I said, integrate this into your life. You now have a new life that you didn't ask for, you don't want. It's not as sharply painful as when your loved one had just died. But now you have an empty house, or now you've lost a large part of your identity. Mm-hmm. You're no longer a parent, or you're no longer a spouse. What does that mean? How do I move forward with that? This is very, very close to Ian 0.0 before I started on this other path, which, to get back to your former question, I don't regret at all. And I think a lot of the assistance I'm hopefully able to offer now is because of those things grief and otherwise that I've gone through.
Yeah.
But also it's just kind of the essence of who I am, I think. Yeah.
Beautiful, Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see in you, Ian, this, in the midst of chaos and fire, just with your life experiences that you've described, this keen eye to have a calm heart, have a listening ear. Let's figure out what the real stuff is, and we'll get through it.
Yeah. I think
just seeing you apply that in bereavement too, of let's work through this, let's address it, let's go through this fire together.
Yeah. I think, you know, that's really insightful for me. I had not thought of that way. When I was doing consulting, the type of consulting I specialized in was interim administration of for-profit physician-owned groups. And, you know, that's interesting consulting because it's on-site, it's one at a time. You can't be doing two of these at once. And they're usually fairly long-term, which is why the weather doesn't bother me right now, because one of those assignments, my first assignment was in Fairbanks, Alaska, for a year. But when physicians, and I was more expensive than their administrator who was no longer there for whatever reason, would say, well, why should we hire you? What is your specialty? I mean, are you good at the books? Are you good at people? And I would say, my specialty is making order out of chaos. So you are in a chaotic situation right now, or you would not be talking to me. So I'm going to parachute in here. I'm going to land on the roof. And several months from now, I'm going to walk out the back door having hired your new administrator with your blessing. And it's going to be different. And these are my rates. So it's up to you. I mean, there's no shortage of work here. It's up to you. I mean, but I will give you a positive return on investment.
Wow.
So I like, and that theme that you've identified that I hadn't fully realized until now, that theme is present in law enforcement, in corrections, in healthcare administration, in starting a new executive program, in restarting courses like the medical administration course that had gone dormant. It's like, give me something to make. Now, the downside of that for me is that I'm very easily bored. So maintenance is not something that I like to do.
It's a totally different skill set too.
Yeah, it is. I have great regard for people who can do maintenance and just say, you know, we're going through this and we're making things continue to work. But that's not where I have been historically. And every bereavement situation is, to some extent, chaos.
Yes.
And what they are asking is, where is the order? How can I've phrased this as, show me the evidence for hope. Because I have no hope right now. My life has changed so dramatically. A lot of these people don't want to continue with their lives. Show me evidence of hope, which is another way of saying, give me order out of this chaos, which is a theme. Thank you. I knew there's a reason I came down here today. Thank you for showing me that that is the thread that has gone through all the iterations of my life, is creating order out of chaos as best I can. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I think it was so easy to see just in, you know, the hour thus far of...
This is a 10-minute broadcast, or is that what you said?
No.
I thought you said it was a 10-minute podcast. I didn't know it had been an hour. Okay, sorry.
No, it's so easy to see that thread.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's been very helpful.
Yeah.
I'll say this to my wife when I get home, that this revelation was presented to me, and she'll just look at me like, you are so stupid. Yes.
I told you this whole time.
Well, she has worked for me. I mean, she's been an employee of mine. She's the best medical transcriptionist at the time when medical transcription was a thing. Now it's not anymore, of course, which led to her early retirement. But she has seen me, and she has agreed to work for me because of the type of administrator I am. and put up with the other employees and the physicians before they got to know her and see the quality of her work, saying, oh, well, you have this job because you sleep with the administrator. And then, of course, they saw what great work she did, and then she forgot about that. And she said, now they have great pity on her of being married to the administrator. So she has seen me and agreed to work with me and solved a lot of problems for me in her role because she knows the type of administrator I am, or was.
Yeah, I find it interesting that you're married to Lori, who seems like, with her semi-professional vocalist background, she's in the arts, she's in creative arts, and brings you on these cultural dates to experience more opera. I find that so fascinating because the arts, it's not you don't get a quick answer of how are we doing here.
Right.
It's very subjective.
It is, but from what I have seen with her and the work that she's done with her conductors are very much Ian 3.0 type people. I mean, there's a right way and a wrong way, and people were going to go back, and we're going to go over this measure, and the altos are going to pick it up, and the tenors are going to not be so flat, and we're going to integrate, and we're going to do this, and we're going to keep going over it over and over and over again. So there's a lot of non-subjectivity, or you're subject to the thinking and what the director wants. But it's fascinating to watch because it is absolutely team-based. I mean, her choral group is about 100 people. And, you know, working the dynamics, no pun intended, of those different voices and different people within voices and how it works together, it's very artistic and it's very beautiful, but it's also has an element of you need to be in the right place at the right time doing the right thing. So it's a little bit different than visual art, I think, but I don't know.
And this value that you said earlier in the conversation of, or this wisdom that you shared of be present.
Yes.
Be present.
Yeah.
And with music or with the arts, you have to to capture magic.
You have to be the music. I mean, that's what I see. It's what I saw last night at the opera. I mean, these people, I'm not sure that the headliners, so to speak, were fully conscious of the audience when they were delivering their amazing performance, because it was otherworldly. I have not seen anything like it.
Wow.
You know, and I said to my wife afterwards, now I understand the analogy and maybe the fact of opera singers being able to break glass with their voice, because we were in the first row at the balcony, and I leaned over and I said, do they have mics? And she said, no. I said, what? It's just stunning, stunning. So anyway.
Yeah. Ian, how would you answer this question? What makes your eyes light up?
There are a lot of things that make my eyes light up, and I think increasingly. You know, a variant of that question is what makes you tear up? I think Celtic wisdom, and I'm very much a Celtic spirituality type of person, which has elements of Richard Rohr, it has elements of Franciscan Catholicism. There are a lot of elements there, and if I might, the dividing line, so to speak, is once you acknowledge that there is a divine presence, and that leaves aside a lot of people. So now you've acknowledged that. Do you believe this divine presence, this spiritual world, is separate from us and we interact with it? Or do you believe it is part of us? Is God in this room with us? The Celtic spirituality says that God is in us and we are in God. And companioning people who are sorting through these questions, sometimes because they just want to chat, sometimes because they're in some level of crisis or trauma, is what really makes me think that that's what my role is right now, is to absolutely not convert anyone. I never go into a hospital room with a Bible. I don't wear a cross. So I always go in respecting and questioning and trying to get people to understand. And there are some similarities to working with physicians there. I mean, as you know very well, the very best way to get a physician to do anything is for them to think it's their idea. So helping people to come up with their own ideas and to ask questions and to give them safety to ask those questions. So as I said before, when someone says, I don't believe in that God, well, tell me, I don't believe in them either. What God do you believe in? Well, this judgmental God that sits up there in heaven and has a white beard. I said, no, I don't believe in any of that. Those kinds of conversations and what I call companionship with people who are in a place that the Celts refer to as a thin place. A place where the difference between the spiritual world and the physical world is so transparent or even non-existent. Thin places are what really, really interests me. And they don't have to be places, they can be circumstances. And being there with other people and learning and helping is what makes my eyes light up.
I love it. Ian, I'm having another revelation about you in that
I feel this is kind of like therapy. Okay, good. Help me.
I'll tell you my rate after we turn
good.
the mics off.
You can keep the rest of the tea.
That's more than enough. Your common thread of going into chaos and providing order. What I'm realizing too is your lifelong search with your faith is, and you questioning Ian Montgomery's identity every day, reflects some chaos of, I don't truly know my identity, and 4 iterations of Ian Montgomery to 4.0. God is providing you the order in your own chaos.
Yeah. You have to listen. You know, the Buddhists talk a lot about, and Tao also talks a lot about how you want your thinking, your life, to be as much like a smooth lake as possible. I mean, that's the analogy. And at times the lake becomes turbulent. I mean, there's storms, there's waves, but underneath there isn't. There is a soft undulation of the water, in the ocean especially. So one Zen belief is that enlightenment occurs when the wave understands it's the ocean. The wave is not an independent unit that rises and falls. It is part of the ocean. And as that popular talk says, you know, when one fish turns to the other and says, how's the water? And the other fish says, what's water? These are concepts that I think are important to help center yourself, center others, and really it is embedded within Christianity and Christ, but it's a different, it's sometimes a different way of saying everything in the Bible is literally true versus everything in the Bible has meaning. So one of the questions I'm asked a lot by people who are rediscovering their faith is, did this really happen? So let's just pick up an obvious one. Was Mary a virgin? Well, I mean, there's a lot of technical ways to answer that, you know, what the word means, and in the Bible, does it mean young woman? Does it mean virgin? But another way to answer it is, believe whatever you want about that literal historical fact. The question is, what does it mean? What does it mean? And I think every element of the Bible can be viewed in that way. One of the things I had in my office at the university was a prism. And I would often say to students who would come in with one, and sometimes I'd take it to class, what we're going to do is take this prism and we're going to turn it this way, and this way, and this way, because that's what you have to do to discover truth, I think. So anyway, we're getting off topic a little bit.
Wow, yeah.
But those sorts of thoughts and conversations, one-on-one or small groups, are what make my eyes light up.
Thank you, Ian. You mentioned you like to read. What favorite books or book recommendations do you have?
I tend to read two books simultaneously, two types of books simultaneously. Murder mystery and something in the philosophical, spiritual, religious realm. Within murder mystery, I tend to read a lot of Scottish mysteries because of my Celtic background, DNA and history and interest. So there are a lot of Scottish mysteries out there. There's probably 5 or 6 different authors, and I keep discovering them. There must be a group of them that just sits in a little stone hut somewhere and bangs these things out. On the spiritual side, I would divide that into 2 categories. One, Christian-based, so John Dominic Crossan, Marcus Borg, Richard Rohr, people like that. On the non-Christian side, I read a lot of Zen, especially Thich Nhat Hanh. I've read many of his books. The book that I have accessible to me at all times is the Tao Te Ching, which is yet another spiritual tradition. I just think it's, in many respects, it's a very important book. The first line of the Tao Te Ching is, "The Tao that can be named is not the Tao." And I think that is a perfect way to begin to describe spirituality as I see it. So.
Do you have any favorite quotes?
Yes, I've got in my phone, we can be here for another 4 hours because I capture quotes and put them in my phone, and that's something that I do in that in-between sleep time, is review those and look at those and that sort of thing. I tend to have a favorite quote of the moment. And of the moment, well, one I've had for a long time is Ram Dass wrote a book that's called Be Here Now. And I think that's really, really important. A good way to summarize how to be in life. So I would leave it at that. Yeah. I would say there's, like I said, I've got probably 500 quotes, but if you were to say one, I would say, I have a necklace that says Be Here Now on it. The other, it's a cube, a rectangle. It says Be Here Now. It says, quiet your mind, open your heart, remember who you really are. So I think those 4 elements together is Ian 4.0.
That message of being present, being open, I just think about society today with phones, with constant stimulation, with focus being such a lost skill in art, because we're just inundated with so many things. I just feel like your message today and the be present and your favorite quotes and the things that you reflect on is so needed today. And I don't know if you saw it, whether with my class or classes after me, as you get younger and younger kids growing up with this type of technology.
Yeah.
But I think focus is such a lost skill.
Yeah.
And we're more and more losing our way and our identity because there's too many distractions. Yeah. There's too much noise.
It's very hard, and I struggle with this too. It's very hard to get away from the accessibility of your iPhone. One of many reasons why I realized it was time to stop teaching is the constant interruption of the interaction with students in class because of looking at their phones and that sort of thing. And I just, I could figure out ways in my EN 3.0 role, or 2.0 role, how to address that. But the university system, wouldn't allow you to say certain things, like everybody put their phone in the basket or on the back table or whatever. University administrators' minds are just blown by that. And so I just said, I am losing the ability to connect with folks because this just constant multitasking, distraction. And, you mentioned focus. I think a sister component to focus is respect. And respecting yourself and respecting others by not being distracted is something that doesn't occur to a lot of people with this addiction. So yeah, I think in this society, and it's not just phones, it's other things, the ability to be present now has to be a learned thing. It has to, and I will tell you, since starting this MBSR training, mindfulness-based stress reduction, it has never been discussed in the training. But I find that I am on my phone less. Just because I am thinking about mindfulness and being present and that sort of thing, I just segment my phone time. I read all the feeds, I get caught up in the news, whatever, and then I'm done. So yes, I think that's a learned behavior, unfortunately, but I think it's very necessary. And people will find, for the most part, I think, great joy. And I would even go so far as to say, if you don't find great joy after disconnecting at least a little bit from your phone, then you probably need to have a discussion about your life. If you need that kind of stimulation and you can't get centered or get that stimulation in other ways, then there are elements of your life that you need to look at, I think. That's just my thought.
Yeah. Wow.
So.
Wow. Yeah, I think about that a lot.
Yeah, there are great advantages to have all the information in the world available to you on your little device at any moment. There's great advantage to that. No one uses Google more than I do. But there's also, as you said, a significant part of that that's lost. So the exercise we're doing right now in the mindfulness training is mindfulness eating.
What's that look like?
So whatever you're eating, just be mindful, be present, really immerse yourself in the experience of eating this food. So the goal for this meal, or at least this part of the meal or whatever, is to not get through it, to not, flood your senses with, a bunch of pleasurable stuff. It's not to fuel your body. It's not to get this over with. So Thich Nhat Hanh, who I mentioned to you earlier, the Vietnamese Zen monk, said, when you make your tea, make your tea. Meaning, don't do anything else. So just enjoy your tea.
Beautiful, Ian.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do one side detour, and
Okay.
then we're going to start landing the plane with some rapid-fire questions. But the side detour is, I need to ask you about state-level powerlifting champion.
Oh.
What is this all about?
Well, what this is about is, when I worked at the security hospital, it won't surprise you to learn that when you're working with some of these convicts, the bigger you are, the stronger you are, the more intimidating you are, the better. So I used to weigh, I think I'm now 47 pounds lighter than I was. I've given away a whole wardrobe full of T-shirts and stuff that are now voluminous on me. So I used to compete at 198, and it was all part of that. It was all part of, let's be strong, because we don't know as a correctional officer or as a deputy sheriff what's going to get thrown at us, but it's probably better to be strong than weak, no matter how much Kevlar you have on. So it started with that, and then it was just a natural interest of mine. And so there's 3 lifts, 3 powerlifting lifts, and I can't do 2 of them anymore because of my age. I was told I should not do this one anymore, and I started playing around with it a little bit. So I'm back to doing it, but when I was told I shouldn't do it anymore is because when I was training for these state level events, I pushed it too hard and just wrecked my shoulders. So,
Oh, gotcha.
But, you know, the main reason why I'm the state champion or was the state champion at my age, weight, and sex is that very few people of that age are stupid enough to do this. So it's kind of, they call it buying a trophy. You pay your entrance fee, you look around, and there's hardly anybody else there. You know, you do this, and then you go home and you got a trophy, and you think, what have I really done? I proved that I'm stupider than anyone else out there to still be trying to do this young man sport. So that's all it means. See, that's my humility coming through. So, yeah.
But what does working out look like in your 70s? I'm so curious about that because I want to maintain good health and longevity and finish well at that stage.
So I go to the gym at least twice a week, Rockwell Collins gym. One day I work on my lift because there's 15 elements to the lift that you have to get just right in order to lift at your capacity, 15 technical elements. So that pretty much consumes one day, and then the other day I do kind of other stuff. And then if I can, I go back a third day. And I'm not lifting heavy anymore except in this one lift, and so I'm just trying to be really careful right now.
Is it the bench press?
Yeah. Yeah. So I like it because, you know, it's a little bit of the old glory in there. I'm not even the best in the gym anymore. I'm, according to the contest that I'm in on Monday, I'm either second or third best in Rockwell. So there's some very strong old guys out there. But it's fun. It's fun to, you know, you mentioned that I used to run a gym way back when. So I've always had an interest in lifting and in my mind, there's a significant difference between exercising and training. So I like having a part of my exercising life be training. You know, I'm training to do this on this date and be the best that I can be for those 3 seconds. Get all 15 elements lined up and at least hit 10 of them. So anyway, hopefully I will stop before I completely wreck my shoulder again.
Yeah, but that's Ian 3.0, right? It's like, you know what the metric is.
Yep.
I know what I'm training for, so you're drawn to that.
There's just a little bit of that left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carries with you.
Yeah.
All right, Ian, I have some rapid fire questions for you. Okay, so these are more quick hitters, and you can expand on it. That's totally fine.
Can I pass?
Yeah, so you can pass.
So you're putting a lot of pressure on me. I'm starting to perspire a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
All right. What is something people often get wrong about you?
Less so now because I've shrunk so much in size, but you know, because of my very directive personality and I was physically intimidated and I shaved my head and ride a Harley and all that stuff, they would think that I was intimidating, and that is certainly not true anymore.
What is one piece of leadership advice you've been given that's so remarkable?
I don't know that anyone has ever really said this, but effectively my response is, it's all about the team. It's all about the team. That doesn't mean it's a democracy, but it does mean that many heads are better than one.
What is your best leadership quality?
I listen.
What's one thing you're really excited about right now?
Honestly, I enjoy NFL football. I'm unfortunately a Bears fan. So
I am as well.
So that's very sad for both of us.
Yes.
But my favorite time of the year is not the Super Bowl. It's this weekend and the next weekend. Mm. So when there's 8 teams playing and when there's 4 teams playing, that's high quality football. And it's been kind of an exhausting week for me, so I'm very interested in getting home. I have a new OLED television, and the dog and I are just going to sit on there, and he's going to pretend like he's watching too. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Are you going to have some snacks along with it? Do you have a go-to?
Well, I'm kind of on a diet restriction because of this contest. I cannot weigh If I weigh over 182, then I'm in a different class. I'm at 181.7 this morning. So,
you just need to use the restroom right before weigh-in.
Yeah. We may. Cole likes carrot sticks, and so do I. So that may be it. Diet Pepsi and carrot sticks. How's that? Want to come over?
Yes. Which we'll be mindfully eating.
Yes, slowly, mindfully, trying not to throw anything at the television. Well, I'm not rooting for any particular team, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's like whatever.
Yeah. Tell me one thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
I am deeply grateful that I've been on this very long journey and I've come out of it better than okay. Better than okay. And that is partially due to my efforts, but mostly due to other people being supportive and helpful. And I would include the 450 or so students that I worked with. There was not a single class, a single course, a single one-on-one interaction that I had during that period where I didn't learn something. And I've learned something here. I've learned a lot here. So I'm very grateful for that.
Love it. All right, these next set of questions, it's a phrase that I'm going to start and you're going to finish.
Okay.
It all comes down to
being centered.
Pressure comes from
outside.
Are you a rule breaker or rule follower?
Breaker.
And this is the final one. You're going to finish this sentence. I am
on a pathway to being centered and of help to other people. Yeah.
Love it, Ian. Well, I think this is a good place to wrap up. Ian, thank you for your mentorship to me and wisdom, starting back from grad school and beyond, still to this day. Any final thoughts or things you'd like to say?
I would just express gratitude to you for this discussion. I am not one who's interested and enthusiastic about talking about myself, but you've handled this very skillfully, and I think you're going to do very well with this podcast. You certainly have the radio voice, as I mentioned to you, so thank you for this invitation to be here today.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you, Ian. All right, folks, well, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.